And we're live with our 280th episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on social media, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on social media. Seth, say hi.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. Excited to be back. We're running a little bit behind today, but that's par for the
My
course
fault.
when it comes to life. Yes. Yeah. Anyway, we have a lot to get through today. There's been a lot going on. We have a couple of vulnerabilities, CVEs that we want to talk through. Going to demo some use of LLMs in a dynamic assessment, and just in general, talk about the different security news that's available. First things first, though, we are offering Practical Secure Code Review, the AI enhanced version, this week, Thursday and Friday. This is a virtual course. You can, there are still seats available. We'd love to have you if you've been looking for a chance to jump into that. Training.absoluteappsec.com and get in, right? Like, it's going to be a good time, and we're going to be introducing a lot of these same like LLM concepts, use of reflection, other things within that course for analyzing source code. So your opportunity is there. In addition to that, it will be in the newsletter, and we'll be putting it up on the site shortly. We're going to be offering harnessing LLMs for application security at DEF CON this year, at DEF CON trainings. So that will be after DEF CON. That's the couple of days after DEF CON finishes, Monday, Tuesday, because we love Vegas so much. Apparently, we want to stick around for another couple of days after being there for a week. But that is a great course. There's a lot that goes into it, and that one is constantly evolving, as you will see later today. There's just better approaches, better prompts, better ways to go about doing application security. There's been a couple of articles recently as well about like threat modeling at scale, using LLMs at scale for different things, and that's honestly what the course is all about. So both those opportunities are up. We will be doing another virtual harnessing LLMs course at some point as well. Just kind of depends on where that's going to be. And we are looking at offering an exclusive course during Black Hat, not Black Hat USA, but we'll be submitting to a couple of the other ones where we're combining a lot of these into a single like 4-day intensive. So watch out for that. Yeah. Outside of that, I did want to give a shout out to our sponsor today, Redpoint Security. Redpoint specializes in code security by coders, which is bolstered by years of experience testing applications and conducting code reviews against all types of applications. Redpoint also offers secure code training to help ground your teams in better security practices across the development life cycles. So check out redpointsecurity.com for more information and put your company on a path to better security. Sweet. Outside of that, conference-wise, Ken and I will be at BSides and then also at RSA in about a month, maybe a little bit more than that. We're doing a panel on the current state of AppSec, the current state of Absolute AppSec, as we like to call it. We've got Ariel, we've got Lakshmi coming on with us. And we'll just be talking through what the current state is and how things are evolving, like where we should be spending our time and effort, what's gone good, what's gone bad, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Anything else you wanted to bring up announcements-wise, Ken, before we jump into articles?
I guess I just want to, mention just that, you've caught everybody up. Just RSA is coming up. We're starting to plan around that. It's going to be there for like a week, and I want to like make sure to actually meet up with some of the listeners of the podcast. So there is an RSA 2025 channel in our Slack channel. If you're going to RSA, if you're a listener, if you want to meet up, I think we're going to try and Seth and I coordinate at least something, meaning like even if it's just hang out for a little bit somewhere with folks, whatever. I don't know. So yeah, just, I don't know. It'd be nice to catch up with folks while we're out there, either at BSides or RSA.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I'm not quite sure how formal we'll make it, but at the very least, it'll be, hey, on, Friday evening, Saturday evening, let's go find a, you know, a drinking spot or something for a happy hour and see people. Whether or not it's going to be a full on, sponsored thing, we haven't decided yet. There are other things we'll be running during RSA, so it's kind of up in the air for us on that. But yeah, we'll coordinate with people's schedules, see who's around, and make that happen.
Yeah, it's just that week is going to be like more intense for me and for James and I for sure. Working, yeah, it's going to be an intense week. So, anyways,
Yeah.
But definitely want to make that time. So, but that's it. I mean, overall, just I don't know, happy things are going well. We got more security things to talk about. So
yeah. How is it? Well, before we get to the Next.js CVE, right? How has the response been to your comparisons, right, to those blog posts that you've been putting out about C# and Rails and other things?
Yeah, and it's funny because now we're trying to get check marks in Veracode and I forget the other one of the other big names, maybe Fortify or something. We're trying to get them to. I think with Veracode, there's an opportunity to maybe get a trial account and do a bake off there. But now we also want to try those companies as well, because we're like literally, okay, this is not an exaggeration. Like while we were just chatting, I got a message from, I won't say who, but he was like, this is a valid finding. And we actually just found a valid SSRF for someone. So it's like, we're killing them with with the comparisons of like these different tech stacks. We got a Python one coming out this week. The only pushback I've heard so far, the only pushback that makes sense anyways, I think there was a couple things that were like, I don't even know what that means, because they just didn't make sense, but was full repo scanning. So I'm working on fixing that because they're like, oh, that's the limitation of that. Believe me, I'm working on that. But that's totally, we just focused on pull requests first. That's why. In any case, that's the only like pushback that I've gotten. Everybody else is like, yeah, I guess you were right. And I'm like, yeah. I was right all along, man. It just, everything had to catch up. So anyways, it's nice to see it all kind of coming together and just awesome support of all the people who are part of this community. And so it's been really good feedback. We made TLDR InfoSec again. I saw it came out today. So our bake-off comparisons in there as well. So we did Ruby, we did C#, Python one's coming out. And we're going to just keep doing bake-offs and showing like, this is the reality where we're at.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
thanks for asking.
The real world stuff is always interesting, right? Like it's one idea to have pie in the sky. And that's partially what I wanted to show with what I was seeing on the dynamic side and just analyzing it, it's just burp state, right? Because it's like, what can you do with this? And we're still early days on our side, like from a dynamic perspective, but same sort of thing. Big plans for actually rolling that in. I'm interested to see what's going to come out of burp this week. They've announced they've got their
tomorrow
big thing on Thursday.
Yeah.
And we're teaching that day, but I'm going to be following it pretty closely because they're going to be talking about burp AI. They've teased out some stuff about using LLMs to actually analyze and aggregate, findings and endpoints, which is exactly what I'm like. Oh, burp is innovating, right? Like this is not just, hey, I'm taking the scanner and I'm like feeding the results into that and getting better, scanner, summaries. We all know that an LLM can do that, but if they're actually expanding out and giving us access, if I can pull my keys into that, some of this analysis that I'm doing will go a long way, right?
That's the right strategy. Like, no, what you just said is the right strategy because like I've said before, when you try to like bolt it on top of your existing, that's the issue, is the underlying technology of what all of this was built on, right? You have to fundamentally and foundationally move away from that and go, I hate to say it, but you kind of have to go more AI native to be effective. I mean, not to say like you can't the underlying request response engine, all that stuff, that's not what I'm talking about. But in any case, my point being, it sounds like they're doing or taking the right strategy and not just, like you said, bolting it on top and just trying to like summarize results better or whatever, because that's
we will
not
see
very interesting.
We will see, because I know a lot of people, like, I mean, we've had, James, right, on the Kettle on the podcast. We've talked with him. Like, there's a lot of smart researchers that are over there that I hope are pushing that direction. I mean, they look to utilize burp suites, but they're doing it from a extensibility perspective and not just like, hey, we have to shoehorn things into it. But my fear is that we're going to get shoehorned into it. And so, right, like I'm cautiously optimistic about what's going to come out of that, and how we're going to be able to utilize it. From a prompt perspective, because if I can start to use some of my reflection prompts and use it as a request response engine for, what we want to do and what we're analyzing for customers, that's huge, right? It's massive. But if they're not going to do it, we have other avenues. That's basically what I'm getting at.
I see. I see. I see. I'm slow on the uptake. That's interesting. Yeah. Well, and it'll be nice for defenders too if Burp does go that route. And actually, yeah, I can't wait. I actually registered for it just so, because I knew we were going to be training and I didn't know.
I want to see the video. I did the same
but
thing.
I want to see the video. Exactly.
Yeah.
I want to see the material after. I know I can't be there live, but so I'm really, this is why, because you asked, like, how are you feeling? How are things? And I'm like, I'm really excited right now. Like, 2025 is a cool year. It's been a very interesting year. In just a few months, we're seeing so many changes. Like, I don't know. I just feel like it's a very exciting time. I would say there was a couple years where I was like, all right, this is feeling like the same thing over and over again. And then now, like, we're seeing the rise of vibe coding and, all these different things.
Vibe coding. Yeah.
And all of these reactions to the different things going on in our ecosystem where people are trying to like innovate, to get out in front of what's coming next. And just, I don't know. We've seen some good exploits this year. We've seen, I don't know, lots of good stuff in general, research wise. So I just feel pretty good about this year and application security and where things are headed.
Yeah. Yep. Same. And I'm sure all of this is going to pop up in our, in our panel in San Francisco as well. So, sweet. All right. So let's dive into Next.js. And
sure.
You just want the blog post? Should we put that in from Next.js?
Yeah, I'm fine. Well, I was going to put in the breakdown by the actual researcher.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but
I'll put in the actual blog post from them. But let's talk through the researcher, right? Like that. Yeah.
Do you want me to pull it up on my screen, or do you want to pull it up? I don't have a preference.
You can go ahead if you want to. Right.
Sure. Yeah. Let me move my screens around and get it to be shareable in a good way. Present, share file, or share screen.
Andrew was just asking what it was like to be on a podcast with the PANS champion, by the way, right?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's nice of you. I did compete. Yeah, I did compete this weekend. If you don't do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you won't care about the next 30 seconds. But I competed this weekend at PANS, which is a major worldwide level tournament in Florida. I beat everybody in my division for gold. I almost beat the number one guy. Just lost by in a different division, open class anyway. So I got silver there. But nearly took out the number one guy. So I felt pretty good, man. It's hard at brown belt to do that because you're on the cusp of black belt. So, pretty good folks. I was happy.
Mm-hmm.
Broke somebody's foot, as mentioned. You saw the video. Yes. Anyways, all right. So back to application security. Right. So basically the gist is here, if we're going to just summarize it, you could send a request header in an HTTP request and bypass any sort of authorization. Okay. So that's the high level summary. It's nuts how simplistic it is to bypass authorization and if you're wondering, what does this affect? It affected every Next.js application effectively, right? anybody using Next.js, it was vulnerable. Now, there are quite a few interesting things to unpack here, and there's maybe some almost like open questions around design questions, architecture questions of frameworks, and so we have a lot to cover here. We're gonna have to break this all down, but let's dig into the actual code of the vulnerability for a moment here. So if you it really comes down to this next server .typescript file .ts file that's built into Next.js. And by the way, if you're not familiar with Next.js, think of it this way: like Node.js, for a long time, everybody was building their web apps with Express. Express is like Sinatra or Pyramid or any number of these essentially middleware that serve a web, a website, and then you do all the other accoutrements yourself, right? So it's like everything from session handling to templating to everything is, you have to do all of that stuff, right? There's no pre-wired in configurations. There's no conventions that you have to follow or should follow. Now, juxtapose that a bit against Next.js. Now, Next.js is very opinionated. In fact, it's so opinionated, there's certain parts similar to Rails and Laravel. There's certain parts of the application where you need to put it in a specific folder if you want to do if you want to be like, for instance, if you want to be rendered React versus if you want to be server-side code, there's different pathways you actually place the code into. Very specific naming conventions for file names. So when that'll come up here in a second when we talk about like the value of this X middleware sub request header. And so because, that'll be one of the things we unpack here, is that like there are benefits to strict naming conventions and strict conventions, but there are downsides as well, which we'll get into here. All right, so just to cut through this code real quick, there's a sorry, the last thing about Next.js. Next.js, obviously I mentioned it. The idea here is that you can render both your React components and your server-side components, bundle them up nice and neatly, and Next.js is just supposed to make that all easier. So you see people move away from, I saw this a couple of years ago, where people moved away from Express into Next.js. Okay, all right. So we take in this code here, we take this request header X middleware sub request, we create a sub rec object out of it, and then just basically below and sorry, there's the sub request value that comes out of it, which is just splitting the string. So you've got the key and the value, the key being X middleware sub request, the value being whatever you supplied. And basically it says if that sub request includes middleware info.name, then it says next response.next. Now what that does is it actually says, hey, rather than execute each individual middleware that's placed into the route configuration, just ignore it all. Don't go through any of the middleware. Don't run any of the middleware. Just ignore it. Just go to the last thing. I say the last thing because it's kind of similar with Express, where you've got the path that you want to send a request to. You've got some middleware in between, comma separated, and then the last thing is always going to be, the first thing's always the path. The last thing's always the place that the request gets processed. So if you skip all the middleware in between, some of that middleware might be used for authorization. And that's sort of like where this vulnerability actually comes up. And the last thing I'll say here before I pause and have Seth weigh in here is that going back to like middleware info.name and kind of the question of what that is. Well, again, because this is a very naming convention specific framework, I want to, they talk about it. I want to say it's, so before version 12.12, the middleware convention had to be named middleware_middleware.ts. So 12.2 and below, there was only one way you can name it. And then I guess App Router was released in version 13 of Next.js. And then that was like pages /_middleware. So it's sort of it's not the hardest thing in the world to figure out, and this is one of the downsides of being highly specific with your naming conventions and with where things are placed, is that I will say, and we've seen this a lot with Ruby on Rails, when CVEs get released, and there are exploits that require at least like knowing some location of an important file. Like for instance, with Ruby on Rails, there was this render thing where you could render any file. And so, if someone was silly enough to put their session key generation token in a hard coded file, well, you knew which file to request because it only lives in one place and it has a specific naming convention. So, it's things like that I will say, when there is a CVE, not only does it affect everybody universally, but also it tends to be a little bit easier to exploit. So far, what are your thoughts just so far, Seth, on this whole thing?
It's really an interesting case of what can I think what you've said, like what can go wrong when you're depending on these various components within an opinionated framework, right? Like we put a lot of trust into these libraries, into middleware specifically, thinking about Rails and Django and Next.js and right, like even ASP.NET and some of these other, large scale frameworks that are used to build applications quickly. It's great because we can follow the agile methodology. We can get, these things out the door, but a lot of times we don't necessarily know what's going on underneath the hood. We trust that people, quote unquote, are looking at open source and making sure that it's secure. But time and time again, we have issues similar to this, right? Where it turns out to be really easy to bypass some sort of security control because we just never thought about it, right? And if I take this a step further, like your mention of vibe coding earlier, this is the sort of stuff that I feel like is going to continue, and it's going to keep biting us from a security perspective. The whole idea behind vibe coding and not having to actually be a coder to produce an application, right? Like low code platforms in general, it's great up until you have a misconfiguration, up until you have a CVE that all of a sudden exposes, hundreds of thousands of sites to very, very real world security problems. And I don't know. I haven't gotten indications that this has been exploited yet. At least, but I haven't been paying too much attention to it. I know I saw 6 Mile in Slack was actually he produced a nuclei template and pushed it out to GitHub to actually search, to run against your server if you're running Next.js. There's a few of those that are out there now. I mean, Next.js released like a WAF rule that you could roll out as well for CloudFront or whatever it is, right? Like to actually prevent this header from making it to your Next.js server. So in the case that you can't actually implement, there's protections that are out there. It's all about knowing whether or not you are vulnerable to this. But man, it's going to have real world issues, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. And you hope everybody just like updates, right? But we all know that the reality is that doesn't tend to be how it works realistically,
No, yeah. Well, and I mean, this is part of the
mean,
problem. Like you're a defender, right? I have a Next.js application, and this is one of the oh man, I like this is one of the problems trying to be a product security, application security engineer on a blue team or for an organization. So when something like this comes out, it's all hands on deck. But realistically, can you shut down your main money making application because of this vulnerability? Right?
Yeah, no.
If you're down for a week trying to fix this and you impact like and that's millions of dollars that you have just turned off for the company coffers, that's not going to be looked at highly. Now, if you can show that it's going to prevent like millions of dollars of theft and the balance is there, that's great. But I still run into multiple clients and multiple vendors that have, they have code that's running from 10 plus years ago. It might not be directly exposed to the internet at large, but internal organization, but only to the internal organization. But the trivial nature of exploiting those sorts of vulnerabilities gets worse and worse over time, the more of these types of things that we find. So I can very well see like, oh, we've got like an admin portal that's built on Next.js that happens to be using this. Hey, guess what? It's we're using all of our customer support agents use this. We don't have the time to actually upgrade it. So we're going to leave it in place just from a threat perspective because it has material impact to the company. If we turn off the support lines and we can't actually process things or we can't help customers, and guess what? Within 2 weeks, we've kind of forgotten about it. It's on the backlog that we need to actually update this. And then you get compromised through some other avenue, through a phishing email or something like that. And all of a sudden, your whole customer support portal has been locked down and is in ransomware because of this, right? Like this is the cascade of things that happens. And that's a theoretical scenario, but I easily see it turning out that way because so much is built upon these sorts of frameworks nowadays. And I know I'm going off on like, I'm conjecturing, right? Like at this point, but that's the fear that I have because I see stuff from 10 plus years ago that has never been updated. And I don't know how to make it. Yeah. Like, I don't know necessarily how to make the case and how to help people walk through that with the relevant players. I mean, what is your suggestion? Like, what is your thought on that?
I mean, like, I'm a little confused. Are you saying like people just can't, for one reason or another, they just can't update? Like it would just impact.
Usually that's what it comes down to. Either they don't recognize it, they're not in our channels, they don't see this actually pop up. And like there's also the noise factor, right? But then it's also like, okay, they do an initial threat analysis and they're like, well, it's not client facing, it's not internet facing. We're just gonna leave it for now.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like I mean, well, okay. If you're strategizing, like if you're internally prioritizing, you have, say, I don't know, 100 I'm just going to make it easy. Let's say you have 100 applications, 50 of them are, half of them are front facing, external facing, half of them are not. They're all using vulnerable Next.js. Well, yeah, obviously I'm going to prioritize the exterior facing ones. And then I'm going to, in this scenario, there's probably other things that might matter, but yeah, I'd probably prioritize external facing first. And then even then I would say like which of these, by data classification, which is one thing we always tell people is, understand the level of data risk that's flowing through your applications in a service catalog, what are risky for what reasons. And so if you know that 5 of these applications are holding things that are very, very scary, bypass maybe administrative checks, get into the admin dashboard, yeah, that's all very scary. I think for me, like one fundamental question I have here though is like, this has been because we talk about this every time we give that secure code review course. We get to Node.js and Express, and we always talk about, understand that this is middleware. It's not necessarily authorization. Yes, you can fit authorization in there. You can fit redirects for authentication. You can do those things, but they're not. You have to whenever you're doing a review, you have to remember that when those routes are defined and the middleware is placed in them, that is middleware. You can't just assume it's authorization, even if it says auth in it. You have to actually look at it and figure out
what it does,
what it's doing. Yeah. And I've always felt that's a weird place to put authorization. I've always felt that way, and to also intermingle middleware with authorization. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And I mean, part of this too, it becomes very important in that chain of execution where middleware is actually applied, right? So if I am applying this on a like app.route or app.use or app.get, whatever it is, right? I guess app.get, route, put, whatever. If I'm applying it on that, depending on where I actually inject that middleware, there is data that can be leaked. There's sessions that can be created. There's other things that can happen. if the auth middleware is not directly in the right place and it doesn't happen like before, if we compare this type of execution, right, against Rails, for example, and we still have the same issue can exist with Rails. You've got before action, right? But you can have multiple before actions that take place. And so depending on that order becomes so important when you are checking for any sort of security control, right?
And any exceptions versus any onlys, because those go even further where they say we can apply these decorators broadly to everything here, or we can either say only these actions need this authorization decorator applied to them, or you can say except or apply them to all of these except these these actions. So it gets even more complex. Actually, when Justin Collins and Neil Matatal were doing Brakeman Pro with the GUI, he asked me, Justin asked me, hey, is there any kind of features for Brakeman Pro you'd really like to see? And I said, dude, I'd actually love a breakdown of all of the authorization decorators, controller by controller, as well as on a controller level, which actions are applied to and which ones they are, and then the ordering. And it's exactly because what you're saying is that it's still, even though it's a little different in where it's applied and whatever, it's still mentally that same kind of those hoops you kind of have to jump through to figure out, am I really secured or not?
Exactly. Well, and actually this it feeds right into the secure code methodology, right? Understanding how an application actually implements authorization is so crucial for your analysis of the code base, or even a dynamic assessment, right? Anything that we're doing in the application security space, we always fall back to Robert's bringing up CIA, but I always fall back to AAA, right? That's my favorite is, and he's talking availability. I'm talking authorization, but without that understanding of where those authorization controls are actually implemented, you don't have an idea of what you don't truly understand the application, and you've got to understand that context. I'm it's one of the things I'm constantly asking that my team members, right? When we're talking about applications, okay, so which cookies, from a dynamic perspective, how are sessions handled? Are you dependent on JWTs, or you're dependent on authorization bearer tokens, or are you dependent on cookies? Which ones actually have a material impact to how you access this application? Because the second that you start to throw in multiple different mechanisms, that's where mistakes are made. So similar to this, right? We created this middleware, header for a very benign reason. We didn't want to, DOS ourselves. We didn't want to create a denial of service condition where middleware was looping and calling the same thing over and over. And so we're using this HTTP header to determine whether or not it is coming from middleware versus the end client. Okay, that seems innocuous, but then we forgot about that edge case on the front end, that when a client includes this, it actually disables everything after that from a middleware perspective. And all of a sudden you've got access to the dashboard, you've got access to the whole application.
Well, and I figured they probably did that because it was convenient to add that header into because a lot of frameworks, or I said a lot of frameworks, but a lot of web stacks tend to inject their own things into. I remember at GitHub we had a weird thing that happened because of a similar thing where, and I think it might have been Neil actually who was trying to figure out why is this request different when it hits this part of the app versus the other part, and it's well, stuff was getting added internally. So it was probably very much, this was done in the name of convenience, I would imagine. I will point out because I did want to circle back to Bobby Tonic's comment in a second here, but I did want to point out that in their new Vercel, Vercel's are the folks who make Next.js, in their in one of their latest pull requests, they updated their documentation, and I thought it would be good to to highlight that, but hold on, it's not actually showing it. So let me give me one moment here to find it again, or not find it, but show it. Yeah, there we go. Let me zoom in so it's not so hard to see, but you'll notice some interesting things here. So they talk about their use cases for their middleware, and they delete the sentence that says integrating. And by the way, Will Talos, he brought this up in Slack. He was the one who originally mentioned, should this be a place middleware? Should this be a place where authorization and session management is done, right? And so, under that scenario here, I think he meant more session management. So to that point, they remove this statement that says integrating middleware into your application can lead to significant improvements in performance, security, and user experience. They deleted that completely. And then they said they added some common scenarios where middleware is effective include, and you'll notice they took away they removed authentication and authorization from that section. They removed a couple other things around server-side redirects and path rewriting and bot detection, logging and analytics, and feature flagging. And then they replaced all of those statements with quick redirects. And by the way, I'm saying this out loud because I know people can read, but I know we have listeners on the podcast that are viewers, so I'm doing that for them. Anyways, modifying headers for all pages of or a subset of pages, I think is what they meant to put there. They have a little bit of a typo. So then they removed another section that said recognizing situations where middleware may not be the optimal approach is just as crucial. Here are some situations. They removed that. Just flat out said middleware is not a good fit for. And what they added was slow data fetching, session management. So why am I bringing this up? I feel like it should be shown that as we're having this conversation about, is middleware and frameworks doing or, having session management related features at that level, it's like, well, clearly Next.js has a pretty opinionated view of this, that they've changed, their documentation to say, no, don't do session management at the middleware level. So I thought that was interesting. And the last thing I'll say, oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was gonna jump onto that because I don't like use of middleware in and of itself. Can be a place to do that sort of thing. Is it ideal, right? For situations like this, probably not. And I don't know if this is a knee-jerk reaction, because if I look at Node Express and ways to actually build applications, you've got things like Helmet and other security middleware that's in place. It's just a matter of recognizing how things are executing, right? And whether or not it's synchronous versus asynchronous, and understanding the platform that you're using and how it's actually implemented. And I get the knee-jerk reaction because they're just going to get beat up on this, right? Next.js is obviously taking a hit here because of what has happened. So I kind of feel for those guys on the one side, but I also don't feel like it's where else are you going to actually do this? Are you recommending that we push this all down to the controller level? Are you recommending that we push this down to a per function, per get, level to actually roll this out? Because there's still it still has to be done. Or are you planning on building your own authentication authorization engine into Next.js that handles this for you? You're going to have flaws in that as well, right? I go back and forth because I'm like, the way that these applications work, middleware is crucial to actually serving up and doing some sort of security control.
I don't have an interesting question of using something in a generalized, because Bobby says middleware is not the issue, and I don't disagree with either of you. I think you're absolutely right. But I do think the more in coding in software, the more concrete and discrete and specific your thing is, the least likely it is to be. I'll put it this way, actually, the inverse of that. The more flexible anything is, a function, a class, a design element inside of an application or software, truly, that is when I see more vulnerabilities pop up than when I see a very concrete, discrete, routine that is just, it's not the most beautiful thing to look at. It's a lot of code. It's stuff that, is not reusable in a lot of ways, but that does tend to be a little bit more secure from my experience. And I don't know if you feel that too, but I do feel like a lack of flexibility, which is like, I know that's not what developers like. I know that that's not what I like. I don't think it's a fun programming pattern, but I will say it does tend to lead to not worse outcomes. So I guess why I'm saying that is, and again, I don't know what your opinion is here. I'm interested to hear it, but I feel like if you say this is explicitly the only thing this mechanism does, whatever that thing is, and that pattern is just for this thing, which in this case, authorization or session management, right? But what are your like? Is this ever bothered you? Ever been a thing that sort of
no, it does, right? Like, yeah, because I see this from a paved path perspective, right? Like we have, and this is what's happening here is, right? Like, hey, we're quickly prototyping applications, pushing them out the door, which is exactly what we want. We're making it easier for developers to use authorization. But when that package has a flaw, what's going to happen, right? Like we haven't protected ourselves against that. So I'm with you, right? If we look at very, very secure software, they have thought through every single access pattern into any sensitive content, functionality, or data, and it's protected by itself in multiple ways. Right? For most internet applications, it's typically how can I get this functionality as quickly and as cheaply as possible from a development perspective, and move on to something else. Yes, I want it to be secure, but I'm using middleware. I'm using something else to do that. And to Robert's point, right, middleware isn't the problem. I don't think I'm with him there. I don't think middleware is the problem. It's the execution, it's the side effects, it's how we're implementing it. It's not thinking through what happens when middleware fails that leads to these sorts of problems. And then also, hey, do we know when the middleware is actually turned off? Is that logged? Is that audited when those requests come in that have that sort of data in it? I bet there's a lot. Like if I'm running a Next.js application that has this implemented, that's probably not something the middleware was logging in and of itself. So I'm probably having to comb through massive amounts of data to actually see when requests came from external resources with this specific header associated with that, what data and functionalities there. Like, I think from a response perspective, this is just a huge headache, right? Like you're looking at Splunk logs and Elasticsearch for these, for this access pattern now, because it's not something that we flagged in the past. So I'm with you. I think it kind of goes back to how I'm building my software, what I'm considering to be, a possible vulnerable path, and then depending too much on third parties instead of thinking through the full implications of using those third parties.
Yeah, you're right. It is that. That's tough, man, when you're using software that other people built, and you have to, right? Like, I mean, you kind of have to. I mean, who's going to just build their own web framework? And really, like, there's huge downsides to that too. So I'd almost say, like, don't do that. No, but don't build your own framework. But yeah, you are dependent upon the environment in which you're working. And I know Robert here, Bobby had said, when it's like a sequential or linear, and it's like this has to execute in this order, there's less issues. Yeah, that's probably true. But I think also it's just it should be understood that yeah, these frameworks do a lot of weird things under the hood, and if you're not the one who wrote it and you haven't reviewed all that code, I mean, stuff, you're just a victim of it. It's not your fault, right? You just have to kind of respond to it and deal with it when it happens. It just kind of stinks. But yeah, I don't know. I think this one really, it's also surprising that it had, because I don't want to, because this is awesome research. This is great job to the people that found this and released it and worked with Vercel. Like, great job all around. Amazing. I am surprised this wasn't found sooner. Like, it's pretty blatant, right? And this is that's a pretty rough one to see in the code. Like as soon as I saw the screenshot, I was like, oh shit, yeah, that's not good. Like I knew immediately I could see what was going on immediately. So
yeah.
But I hope vibe coding doesn't, like you said, because you had mentioned vibe coding and how this stuff like this will be more prevalent. And my only hope there is that the people who are reviewing the changes, well, A, that people are reviewing changes, and then B, that they have either good tooling, well, hopefully both, hopefully good tooling but more importantly, and I'd argue it's always more important, a good human being, reviewing that code for flaws. And I don't mean Vercel, I mean regarding vibe coding and just code that's flowing, in general. Yeah, because obviously people are going to be submitting stuff they didn't really write themselves, maybe glanced at and then submitted and made sure it worked and then submitted. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyways,
we'll see. We'll see on that stuff because I haven't been asked to test anything that was vibe coded yet, right? Like, it gives me comfort in job security because I'm fairly certain it's going to lead to insecurities and there's going to be issues that pop up and we'll see, right? Like we'll see. That's definitely coming. I just don't know it. Well, true. I probably just don't know yet. So
I know I've reviewed vibe coded code before myself. So
yes. All right. What do you want to jump into? Do you want to talk about that Nginx one?
Do you want to do your demo? I think you had a demo. You'd said
sure,
but I don't want to put you on the spot. Whatever you want to do.
Can. Hold on, let's take a look here really quick. Okay, so one of the things that we've been exploring, and I'm giving a talk at BSidesSLC Salt Lake City in actually a couple of weeks on user enumeration, right? Like just the fact that we find it in all sorts of places and all, interesting applications. And, sometimes users care or sometimes developers care, sometimes organizations don't, but we see it in probably 90% of the applications we test in some form or another. And so one of the things that we struck out to do is actually see if we could have an LLM tell us whether or not requests may be vulnerable to user enumeration flaws. We haven't gone to, eventually we're going to go to the route of actually testing those, right? And then have the LLMs test them. But we've been implementing the principles that we've been talking about in harnessing LLMs for application security. We're using reflection and other things to actually identify this. So let me show you really quick here. All right, so I'm into the application. This is the script that we've written. I've got a session here. It's called VTM session, right? All this is an export from Burp Suite of access to the vulnerable task manager application that Ken and I highlight in our courses and that we use for training purposes. So I know that there are instances of user enumeration in this intentionally vulnerable application. 5-minute session. I just went in and I walked around the application. I didn't attempt to exploit anything, even though I know that it has those in there. And what I'm doing is creating a system prompt with reflection that's basically, hey, you're analyzing this HTTP request for possible user enumeration vulnerabilities and like challenging its own assumptions using reflection, and then sending it a specific here's an HTTP request, check it out and let me know whether or not it is vulnerable to either user enumeration or email enumeration. Those are the only things that I care about. One of the problems that I've run into from a creativity perspective in LLM specifically when I'm looking at requests and responses asking about vulnerabilities, and I know Ken you've dealt with this as well, is that they come back with a fair amount of added content. They attempt to be creative and to tell you things about other vulnerabilities and other issues that may exist.
Oh, yeah.
And you'll notice one of the things that I found, and we'll talk about this shortly, but so I'll just run that script. We're using Haiku 3.5 in this instance. So it's parsing through 46 requests. And it's going to go through each of those. Some of this I could probably ignore if I was being smart about it, right? Backend, like JavaScript and other things. All right, like that's fine. I know that those probably won't have user enumeration in there, but it's a good gut check to actually see, to make sure that there's not some sort of email or username that's being sent for these JavaScript files. But you'll see as it flows through here, I'm getting back like the none on this, right? And it's like, okay, this is a static JavaScript file. And I threw the justification in here so I could validate what was actually going on with the LLM in these cases, right? Okay, project details, it's saying no. This is 713. This is some sort of task. But you'll notice like it does see that the JWT access token is being used there. It's decoding it and actually identifying the user ID that is being used to call that. Okay, now we get to download profile pick. And it's saying, hey, this is possible because the profile, like the ID for the profile, could possibly be a user identifier that we need to be concerned about. Okay, that's absolutely right. Like that's one that I did not necessarily think about. Forgot password, you'll see that one there. That's coming in. That's definitely a yes for email enumeration because that's how we're looking things up. It's giving the parameters that are being used for that. Possible email, possible user enumeration. The login page, just the default login page, the GET request is not, because there's nothing in there that's actually that interesting, but the post actually is, right? This is exactly the sort of content that I would be expecting from from one of my testers, right? Hey, if I look at this list, where is it that I need to go next, right? What is it that could be interesting to me from an enumeration perspective? And now all I have to do is build out the agentic, or using agentic AI, a tool to actually run this test against those different endpoints. But you'll see 46 attempts here. This runs fairly quickly. Like it's not the fastest thing in the world, but it's a lot faster than me combing through each of these. And I can slim this down pretty quickly to the ones that I'm really interested in and move on from there. But this is, this is the kind of stuff that makes me excited as well, right? Okay, post request to register. Yeah, there's a possibility there for user and email enumeration. Awesome, right? That's what we've got to take a look at. Reset password, like all of these different endpoints. Super interesting, right?
Oh yeah, I know, it's nice.
Oh crap! It didn't actually flip. Sorry. Well,
I'm listening, so
yeah. Dang it. So here, let me.
It doesn't. It's weird, Seth. Like StreamYard didn't flip for me either. It's like you have to almost reshare. I don't know if there's like a new.
Yeah, it
issue.
doesn't.
I was about to say something, but you figured it out.
Let me try that again. Window. All right. So this was the output. Dang it. As I was talking through that, right? Like, whoops. Yeah, let's see. All right. Okay. So this is the content. And can you see that now? Let's see.
Yeah.
Sure. Yep. It's actually showing it. Yeah. So you'll see initially it's just the JavaScript, right? Output. Those requests that are being made. You'll see a request to, the main task manager page. There's nothing there. Project details, right? Like nothing that interesting until we start getting down to, okay, the profile pic, right? Like it's identifying the profile picture and that number as a potential numeric identifier for users. That's completely valid. That is a possible user enumeration point that I didn't even think of, right? From my perspective, that was more insecure direct object reference. But I'm like, oh, you're absolutely right, especially if that's giving out any sort of user detail, right? Forgot password, possible there for GET requests and for post requests, specifically email enumeration, right? Login process, the GET request probably isn't, but the post request is. And so like we are building out these agents for all sorts of things that we're looking at, especially that kind of this sort of analysis to start an assessment means that I just need to browse, and then I can have the LLM point me at endpoints that I would normally have to, comb through and look at a request response for and actually do, it's speeding up our analysis. That's all I'm getting into there. So,
Nice. Well, yeah. And really, I mean, I wonder, well, yeah, actually, I'll just let you finish.
yeah. Manage groups, like that's another interesting one because it has team member information that's in there. Profile, again, the user ID and the URL path. Registration sees both a username and password being sent in from a parameter perspective. Yep, those are interesting. One of the things that I did find to be really interesting in this as we were building it out was trying to get this like format back out, right? Like a predictable format that comes back from the LLM, and having to basically capitalize, do not send me additional data outside of this, right? Like I don't want to know anything except these single questions that I'm asking in the format that I expect. Because the second that it throws it off, it's interesting. But I did have to capitalize do not, right? So,
yeah.
Anyway,
you know, would be interesting as I was thinking about this is be like to take, like if you're a consultancy, for instance, is like to take a knowledge base. I mean, it'd be nice if this should be open source, but obviously more data, better. But it'd be nice if there was like a way to essentially take all of what you've done dynamically and allow, to feed it into an LLM for the sole purpose of basically profiling the most likely types of attacks on that specific application. So like, everything from the tribal knowledge you've acquired for that specific customer to the technology stack specific knowledge that maybe you have, as well as the broader community for vulnerabilities, the request responses, the parameters within them, the way that it does everything, the way that the user management happens, session management, and what things are you submitting to the application, like what type of data, and using all of that to get like a prioritized list of you should try to attack these endpoints with these types of things, or more generally look for these types of things in the application. I think that would be, maybe that's part of Burp's thing. I don't know. We'll see. But I think that would be a really useful thing. And the other thought I had while I was looking at that too. Well, actually, I'll pause because it sounds like you had something you wanted to say there. So
yeah, I mean that's what I was getting to. Is I'm like, hey, like over time we've manually been creating basically checklists of things that we need to go back and investigate, right? And when we create those manually, we're all limited by, number one, the amount of time that we have. Number two, the experience that we have against a specific application, framework, whatever it is. But if we can harness something like an LLM in this case to actually push those boundaries and speed up that analysis and just give us that list for the manual testing, so I can spend my time actually exploiting as opposed to just like gathering the data. We become more efficient, basically.
That was my follow-up point, which was, or not point, but so much, not really a point, even just like an open question. It's like, if I'm a consultancy and I got these tools available to me, it's hard not to say that I couldn't take what should be an 80-hour project and squeeze it. And I know I listen, don't hate me for saying it. I'm just saying, like, if I could see consultancies being like, all right, well, I can squeeze out nth number more assessments in this billable period because I've got now these tools and automations. And so that's one question I have. Like, where does that go? And second question is around like vibe securing or vibe security, using like at what point are we like at what point are we going to start saying to ourselves like we're doing vibe sec, right? Because we're using all these assistant tools and maybe it's making our lives comfortable and easier than we think it should be and not screwed. I don't know. But Yeah, it's open questions that I think we have. I know we do have a meeting that you and I are already late for, so
Yeah.
I think we should start to close out the podcast. We're also at the hour, so
Yep. Yeah,
yeah.
we are. So appreciate everyone today. Thanks, Bobby, for chiming in also on chat. Great to
And Leisure Suit Larry.
Yep, and everybody in Slack, Leisure Suit Larry. Improve your vibesec skills, and we will chat again soon, because there's a lot to do there, and yeah, it's going to be fun, right? Like, yeah, we'll see where it goes. I'm trying to think. Any final thoughts, Ken?
No, just, again, I feel like this is going to be, it already has been. We're like almost a third through the way through the year already, if you can believe that. I feel like it's already been a pretty awesome year for AppSec. Still 2/3 of the year left. I'm very excited about it. Thank you for all the listeners and viewers of the podcast and the community in general. I try to always say that, and I really mean it. I know Seth feels the same. I'm saying I really mean we feel that way. We talk about it all the time. So we really appreciate your support. We really love what's happening right now. It's interesting. For me personally, I can say it's making my life more interesting. So just just good place. And thank you all for that.
Okay. All right. Thanks all. We will see you online. Keep the conversation going there. Otherwise, watch for an episode next week. Thanks.